Hello, and welcome to this first in a series entitled Living by Faith. 4 Bible reflections in which we will be journeying in the company of some great figures of faith: Abraham, Ruth, Mary and Paul. During the sessions I will be offering some thoughts and inviting us all to reflect on what the lessons of their lives might be for our own, as we make our own pilgrimages through life. This session will include a short introduction to the series and some insights from the life of Abraham. We are fellow travellers who encounter all sorts of opportunities and challenges in life, passing through mountaintops of joy and through valleys of sorrow, with everything imaginable in between. We are, of course, all living under the dark cloud of coronavirus at present. But even at such a time, all that we meet along the way, the people, the events, the experiences, help to shape us and make us the people we are. Connectedness is a common theme of our humanity, so it is fitting that we look to the lives of those who have gone before for encouragement and insight. They have trodden the path before us, and we walk in their footsteps. My aim is to encourage us to reflect on our own lives through the lenses provided by Abraham, Ruth, Mary and Paul, as we consider the themes of leaving, accompanying, trusting and persevering respectively. It would be helpful if you have a Bible to hand, and at the beginning of each session I will give you the relevant references so that you can refer directly to the passages being considered. I suggest you pause the video at that point and read the passages for yourself before continuing. At the end of each session I will leave you with a few questions to take away for your own personal reflection. Hopefully the questions will help you to make some deeper connections with the theme of the session. It may be that some familiar ground is covered, but that is no bad thing. As T.S. Eliot writes in his poem Little Gidding, "With the drawing of this love and the voice of this calling, we shall not cease from exploration. At the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." Journeys change us, just as the journeys of Abraham, Ruth, Mary and Paul changed them, both in terms of specific journeys and the general sense of the journey through life. We are not the people we were 20 years ago, or 10 or 5, or even last year. All of us have undergone physical changes, accumulated more experience, enjoyed gains and suffered losses. Some hopes will have been met and others dashed. We will have made new friends and cherished old friends, and grieved for those no longer with us. All those things and more mean that we are in a different place from wherever we measure our starting point. We inevitably see the world through a different set of lenses now than was the case back then. The prescription in our lenses has, as it were, changed. Similar is our journey in the life of faith. We are called to live our lives in an ever-deepening relationship with God and with each other. Relationships fashioned by the contours across which life carries us. There are those moments in life when, like a chink of light through a curtain, we glimpse the transcendent. They are moments that are not planned and which cannot be forced, but through which we experience the reality of the loving God who holds all things in being. The Welsh priest and poet R.S. Thomas captures something of this sense of being surprised by God in his poem Bright Field. "I have seen the sun break through to illuminate a small field for a while, and gone my way and forgotten it. But that was the pearl of great price, the one field that had treasure in it. I realize now that I must give all that I have to possess it. Life is not hurrying on to a receding future, nor hankering after an imagined past. It is the turning aside like Moses to the miracle of the lit bush, to a brightness that seemed as transitory as your youth once, but is the eternity that awaits you. It may be a particular place that evokes this sense of connection, a life event, a piece of art or music. The fact of the matter is that God breaks through unbidden in the most unexpected of places, and in the midst of what might seem the most ordinary stages of our journey through life. My aim is to help us ponder such things together as we draw on insights from the stories of Abraham, Ruth, Mary and Paul. So without further ado, let's look at the first of those, the figure of Abraham. Moving away from the familiar can be a scary thing to do. Leaving the place of comfort is never easy. But we are a pilgrim people. Here we have no abiding city. The people of God are always people, not just of the way, the name by which the early followers of Jesus were known, but also people on the way. Abraham, our ancestor in faith, is one of the great examples of how a call from God can move someone from a place of security into an unknown future, bringing great blessings out of simple but profound faith. God called, and Abraham responded to that call. So let's remind ourselves about some aspects of the story of Abraham and see what we might glean from it in relation to our own stories of faith. The Bible references that you might wish to have ready or to have read before continuing are as follows. I'll hold them up on a sheet of paper for you to give you a moment to either to write them down or to pause the video before we move on. I'll just hold them there for a second, and you might want to pause the video now and then come back to it after you've read the passages. The call to set off in new directions can come to us at any stage of life. One of the first things to notice about the call of Abram, as he was then known, is that he was a man of particular vintage. This was not a young man looking to take a year out between A-levels and university. We are told that Abram was 75 years old, not necessarily the age at which to be venturing forth into an unknown future. More often, such a time in life is the time to embrace a gentler pace and perhaps take some time to reflect on the treasure house of memory and experience that long life brings. For example, in his book Anam Cara, Gaelic for soul friend, the late Irish poet and priest John O'Donoghue muses on the gift of memory and writes, "Memory, where our vanished days securely gather. The beauty and invitation of old age offers a time of silence and solitude for a visit to the house of your inner memory. You can revisit all of your past. Your soul is the place where your memory lives." Somewhat romantic, I know, but nevertheless capturing the idea of the treasure that memory can be for us. On our journey through life, there are no hard and fast rules, but generally speaking, we pass through seasons as we grow, changing and developing with the passing of the years. We might remember wistfully the days of our youth when it seemed our bodies were invincible and that we would live forever. But equally, we carry with us in later life the experience and wisdom that can only come with the passing of years. For Abram and his wife Sarai, who was also, as Genesis puts it, advanced in age, there was to be no gentle twilight in which they could reminisce in the way John O'Donoghue suggests. This was not like moving to Spain for retirement, safely nestled within an expat community. There was no way of knowing what to expect in the land of Canaan, to which God was directing them. Imagine what must have gone on in the minds of Abram and Sarai. On the one hand, fear, doubt, resentment, anger. On the other, excitement, anticipation, expectancy and hope. This was a real mixed bag of emotions that will be familiar to any of us when we recall times in life when circumstances pushed us outside of our comfort zones. Moving job or home, an end to a relationship, bereavement, redundancy or retirement, and uniquely at this time of coronavirus, the experience of self-isolation and quarantine. These are just some of the life events that can push us away from the familiar in which we find our security. Though it might also be true in practice that deciding to leave the familiar place, whether that is a physical, psychological or emotional place, is sometimes harder in itself than the journey that ensues, and harder than when the change is forced upon us. Genesis says nothing of the apprehension which Abram and Sarai must have felt. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, is all we read. Whatever their fears and uncertainties, Abram and Sarai responded unhesitatingly to God's call, picked up sticks and headed with other members of their family towards a strange, dangerous land and an unknown future. Yes, there was a promise from God to Abram that from him would come a great nation, and that, as the writer puts it, in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. But hope for the future doesn't negate the strength of feelings that people experience in the present. We should not underestimate the courage of Abram and Sarai and the enormous act of courage that it took to leave what was familiar and venture forth. As they set off into their new and unknown future, trusting in the promise of God that a great nation would be made of them, they must have puzzled over how that would come to pass. Considering their age and the fact that they were childless, the intrepid couple would hardly have considered that this would be through their own children. This is evident particularly in the story of the three strangers meeting Abram and Sarai, now Abraham and Sarah, at the Oaks of Mamre as recorded in Genesis 18. The three strangers who appear to Abraham, understood in Eastern Orthodox theology as God appearing in a mysterious prefiguring of the Holy Trinity, are afforded traditional Middle Eastern hospitality by Abraham and Sarah. Some of you will be familiar with this icon. This is an Orthodox icon painted by the Russian Andrei Rublev, and it depicts this meeting of the three strangers with Abraham and Sarah at the Oaks of Mamre. It is a beautiful icon. And we read in that passage how Sarah overhears a conversation between the strangers and Abraham to the effect that they would return in due course and Sarah would have a son. Sarah laughs this off, chuckling to herself, and we can almost hear her saying, "Men know nothing," and dismissing the promise made to Abraham by the strangers. We know from the story that in a few chapters later that Sarah does in fact conceive and bear Abraham a son, Isaac. But they could not have known that themselves when God promised to make a great nation from them. Importantly, they set off into their unknown future, not having all the answers, but putting their trust in the God who called them. To paint a picture of Abraham as a completely saintly character would, of course, be disingenuous. In both Egypt and Gerar, he treats Sarah in a very dubious manner, and his willingness to sacrifice Isaac is something that remains difficult for us to contemplate. But one thing that we can learn from the story of the call of Abraham is that sometimes we are called by God at any stage in life to take a step of faith, leave the familiar behind, and venture forth, not knowing where the journey might take us, but trusting in God to be with us on the way. Thomas Merton captures this sense of leaving the familiar, the safe place, and venturing forth in response to God's call, in a beautiful prayer with which I draw this session to a close. A prayer of Thomas Merton. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following you does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope that I have the desire in all that I am doing, and I know if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my peril alone. Next time I will be reflecting on the beautiful story of Ruth. It is a short book, just a few chapters long, that you might like to read before watching. In the meantime, here are 3 questions for your personal reflection. I'll read them out one by one, leaving a few seconds between each to give you a chance to pause the video, if you wish, and consider your response. Think of a journey or an event that has been significant for you. Try and sum up in a few words why it has been important. Have you ever been anxious about setting off on a journey or on a different direction in life? How did things turn out? And the last question for consideration: in what ways has your understanding of God changed during the course of your life as an adult? Thank you for watching, and I hope you will look out for the next video. Take care, keep safe, and God bless you.